The ground trembled as the dropship cut through the planet's thick, acrid atmosphere, leaving a fiery streak in the storm-choked sky. Inside, Commander Vorthix tightened his grip on the harness, his three-clawed fingers flexing as turbulence battered the hull. The pilot's voice crackled through his comms. "We're coming in hot, Commander. Class X biosphere confirmed. Hostile terrain, unknown predator density." A violent jolt rocked the cabin. Alarms blared. "Incoming projectile," someone shouted. The ship lurched sideways, the impact screaming through reinforced plating. Vorthix unbuckled just as they crashed into the dense jungle below, metal shrieking, branches snapping like brittle bones. Silence followed, for one breath. Then the jungle roared to life. Vorthix forced himself upright, shaking off the daze. His squad was already moving, elite soldiers trained for the worst. They emerged from the wreckage into suffocating humidity, weapons raised, scanning for threats. The foliage was impossibly thick, towering, black-leaved trees twisted into unnatural shapes, their roots pulsating like exposed arteries. The air stank of decay, sharp and metallic, as if the very oxygen wanted them dead. A guttural snarl cut through the jungle. Vorthix turned just as the creature broke through the undergrowth, a thing of muscle and bone plating standing 15 feet tall, jaws split open in 3 directions, each lined with serrated teeth dripping with acidic saliva. Its claws, thick as daggers, carved deep furrows into the ground with every step. "Formation!" Vorthix barked. Plasma rifles locked onto the target, their blue glow cutting through the mist. The beast roared, charging. They opened fire. Bolts of energy slammed into its carapace, searing through layers of flesh. It barely slowed. One soldier leaped aside as it swiped, the impact shattering a tree where he had stood. Another blast struck its flank, exposing raw muscle. And then, a single, deafening gunshot. The creature's head snapped back. A second shot punched through its skull, and it collapsed mid-stride, hitting the ground hard enough to shake the jungle. Silence. The squad turned. A figure stood atop a moss-covered boulder, one foot resting casually on the carcass. He was human. Dusty boots, a weathered jacket, a revolver in one hand, and a strip of dried meat in the other. He chewed thoughtfully, watching them. "Neat trick," he said, holstering his weapon. "Too bad you wasted all that ammo." Vorthix stiffened. "Identify yourself." The man grinned. "Captain Jace Carter, and you're trespassing on my hunting ground." Vorthix studied him. No armor, no advanced weaponry, just a revolver, an ancient ballistic weapon, primitive by any standard. And yet, he had felled a predator that had shrugged off plasma fire. "You killed that creature with that?" One of Vorthix's soldiers asked, disbelief evident. Jace tapped the side of his revolver. "Sure did. One in the eye, one in the brainstem. They go down easy if you know where to hit him." Vorthix narrowed his eyes. "What kind of planet is this?" Jace chuckled. This isn't a Deathworld. This is just some backwater rock my team's been studying." He gestured toward the jungle. "Dangerous?" "Yeah, but it's got nothing on Earth." Vorthix frowned. He had seen the Galactic Survey's report. This planet had been classified Class X for its hostile environment and high predator index. "What could be worse?" "You claim your world is deadlier?" he asked. Jace took another bite of his dried meat. "Buddy, this place is a vacation spot compared to Earth." There was a long pause. Vorthix studied him, waiting for some sign of deception, but found none. The human spoke with certainty, with the kind of casual arrogance only backed by absolute experience. One of Vorthix's soldiers hesitated. "If this world isn't the real Death World, then what is?" Jace wiped his hands on his pants and flashed a grin. "You ever hear of Australia?" The squad exchanged uneasy glances. Vorthix didn't know what an Australia was, but something about the way Jace said it sent a chill down his spine. Dark humor aside, the implications unsettled him. If this world, where the ground itself seemed to writhe with life, where even the flora exuded a sense of menace, was considered mild by human standards, what kind of horrors existed on Earth? Jace slung a rifle over his shoulder. "Come on. My outpost isn't far. You guys look like you could use a drink. Vorthix hesitated, then gave the order to move. As they followed the human deeper into the jungle, one thought gnawed at the back of his mind. If humanity thrived on a world worse than this, what kind of creatures had it forged them into? And more importantly, what kind of nightmare would it take to truly scare them? The jungle stretched in every direction, dense and unyielding, a labyrinth of gnarled roots and shifting shadows. Vorthix's squad moved in a tight formation, weapons raised despite the humans' insistence that they wouldn't need them. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, blood, perhaps, though Vorthix wasn't sure if it belonged to the beast they had slain or something else entirely. Jace Carter walked ahead of them, hands in his pockets, his gait unbothered, as if the planet's dangers were nothing more than a passing nuisance. Vorthix studied the human's back, his mind circling the same question over and over. How could something so outwardly fragile be so at ease in a place designed to kill? The outpost came into view, a cluster of reinforced buildings surrounded by makeshift barricades. Tall metal spikes jutted from the perimeter, some still stained with dried gore. A tower loomed above it all, its floodlights cutting through the perpetual gloom. Vorthix had seen fortresses before. This was not a fortress. It was something built by those who expected to lose. Jace waved them forward. Welcome to home, sweet home. Try not to touch anything. Some of the walls are still wired with explosives. One of Vorthix's soldiers stiffened. You trapped your own base. Jace shrugged. Had to. Things out here have a habit of testing the fences. As they stepped inside, the alien squad took in their surroundings with silent scrutiny. The buildings were patched together from different materials, some of it clearly human-made, but other pieces looked salvaged from wrecks. Weapons, both primitive and advanced, were lined along the walls. A half-repaired exosuit stood in the corner, its armor scorched. And, sitting in the middle of it all, as if it were the most normal thing in the galaxy, was a human teenager, arm-wrestling a venomous snake. Vorthix's second-in-command tensed. What in the name of the void? The boy, no older than 17, grinned as he slammed the snake's head against the table, stunning it before tossing it into a nearby crate. Lunch, he said simply. Jace clapped a hand on the kid's shoulder. That's Mark. Don't mind him. Kid's been here since he was 12. Vorthix was beginning to understand something terrifying. This wasn't just Jace Carter's madness. It was systemic. Cultural. You raise your young here? Vorthix asked. Jace gave him a look. Of course. Gotta learn somehow. Vorthix could not fathom a species willingly subjecting its children to conditions that would cripple most trained soldiers. And yet, before him was proof that humans didn't just survive here. They flourished. I don't understand, Vorthix admitted. This world is already beyond lethal, but you act as if it is nothing, and you claim Earth is worse. Jace grabbed a canteen from the table, took a swig, and leaned against the wall. Oh yeah, way worse. Vorthix's patience thinned. Explain. Jace exhaled, looking almost sympathetic, as if trying to figure out the best way to break bad news. All right, let's put it this way. This planet? Dangerous, sure. You've got big monsters, nasty weather, and yeah, some of the plants scream when you cut them, but at the end of the day, it's predictable. Things act the way you expect them to. You shoot a predator in the right place, it dies. You avoid the wrong food, you live. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. Earth doesn't play by those rules. Vorthix waited. You ever hear of Australia? Jace continued. That's just a single part of Earth. Small continent. Hell, it's not even the worst place. But the creatures there? He whistled low. You've got spiders the size of your hand that can kill you in minutes. Tiny jellyfish that you don't even feel before you drop dead. Birds that actively pick fights with people for no reason. That sounds inefficient, one of Vorthix's soldiers muttered. Jace grinned. Oh, it gets better. Ever heard of a platypus? It's a mammal that lays eggs, has a venomous spur, and looks like someone mashed 3 different creatures together and hoped for the best. Vorthix felt an unfamiliar sense of unease creeping in. He had fought against genetically engineered war beasts, had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer. But something about the way Jace spoke, with that lazy certainty, unsettled him more than any battlefield. Jace stretched. And let's not even start on the weather. Hurricanes? Tornadoes? Earthquakes? We deal with all of that. Sometimes at the same time. And if Mother Nature ain't trying to kill us, other humans sure as hell will. Vorthix didn't need further elaboration on that point. He had read enough reports on humanity's violent history to know they had nearly destroyed themselves countless times. And yet, despite all of it, they had endured. One of his soldiers spoke, hesitant. And you choose to live there? Jace raised an eyebrow. Yeah, why wouldn't we? The soldier opened his mouth, closed it, then just shook his head. It was an impossibility. No species should have been able to rise from such an environment. A world designed to weed out the weak should not have produced a civilization capable of interstellar travel. And yet, here humanity stood, laughing at danger, thriving in chaos, asterisk, asterisk. Vorthix could not comprehend it. And worse, he was starting to suspect they couldn't either. Jace knocked on the table. All right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's make a deal. You tell me what you're doing on this planet, and I'll show you something fun. Vorthix, against all logic, found himself intrigued. What kind of something? Jace's grin widened. You like survival challenges? Something in his tone made Vorthix's stomach sink. Vorthix had been in countless battlefields, led campaigns across war-torn worlds, and faced horrors engineered to break even the strongest minds. None of that prepared him for the moment he stood on the edge of a cliff, looking down into the valley below, where an ecosystem of pure, unfiltered chaos roamed. The trees here were wrong. Their trunks twisted as if they had grown while writhing in agony, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The air shimmered, dense with a humidity that carried the stench of rot and blood. And then there was the movement. Asterisk, asterisk shadows slipping between the trees, asterisk, asterisk, shapes that didn't match any standard anatomy, limbs that flexed in ways that defied natural order. Jace Carter stood beside him, arms crossed, his expression infuriatingly relaxed. All right, so here's the game. We get dropped in, no weapons, no tech, just instinct and grit. 3 days. You make it out alive, I buy you a drink. If I make it out and you don't, I'm keeping that fancy wrist computer of yours. Vorthix exhaled sharply. You're making a wager on survival? Jace grinned. Survival's just problem-solving with higher stakes. Vorthix looked at his squad. They were elite soldiers, trained for worst-case scenarios. But this? Dropping into an unknown, hyperlethal environment without their armor, without their weapons? It was suicide, and yet the humans stood there, waiting, expecting. Vorthix's pride was a heavy thing, honed by victories and tempered by the expectations of his species. He had doubted humanity's claims about their resilience, their capacity to endure. If he walked away now, he would never know if those claims were just bravado or something far worse. He met Jace's gaze. We do this together. My squad stays out of it. Jace gave a small nod. Fair enough. The transport hovered above the valley, its side hatch sliding open. The wind howled around them, carrying distant screams. Asterisk, asterisk, not of dying creatures, but of things that killed for the joy of it, asterisk, asterisk. Jace stepped forward and jumped without hesitation. Vorthix hesitated for only a second before following. The impact jarred his bones, even with his trained reflexes absorbing most of the fall. He landed in a crouch, rolling through thick undergrowth. Something skittered nearby, chittering in a way that sent a primal warning through his body. He rose, scanning his surroundings. Jace landed a few yards away, completely unfazed. He stretched, rolling his shoulders as if he had simply stepped off a curb. Vorthix straightened, brushing off the filth clinging to his armorless form. What's the plan? Jace smirked. Rule number 1 of Deathworlds: keep moving. The moment he said it, something huge erupted from the foliage. It was quadrupedal, with razor-edged mandibles and a thick, segmented exoskeleton. Its 3 eyes locked onto them, its movements too fast for something its size. It didn't just attack. It lunged like a living missile. Vorthix pivoted, instincts taking over. No weapon, no armor, just raw experience. Asterisk, asterisk, he ducked beneath its charge, rolling as its claws tore through the space he had occupied. Jace sidestepped, quick and fluid, slamming his fist into its exposed joint. There was a wet crunch, and the beast shrieked in agony. It recoiled, mandibles clicking violently. Vorthix saw the opening. He leaped, driving his weight onto its weakened leg, snapping at the joint. The creature crashed to the ground, writhing. Jace grabbed a jagged rock, drove into the exposed tissue beneath its mandibles, and twisted. The thing spasmed once. Then it went still. Vorthix took a breath, glancing at Jace. The human was grinning. Grinning. That was fun, Jace said, wiping his hands on his pants. Vorthix stared at him. You call that fun? Jace shrugged. Could have been worse. Vorthix exhaled sharply. And what would be worse? Jace glanced around, as if considering. Honestly, if it had friends. A moment of heavy silence. Then the undergrowth rustled violently. Vorthix's gut twisted. Jace cracked his knuckles. Well, guess we'll find out. They ran. Vorthix had been in firefights, orbital sieges, tactical retreats. He had never fled like this. The jungle was a living thing, the ground shifting unpredictably, the foliage concealing threats at every turn. Creatures lunged from the shadows, teeth and claws flashing, but Jace moved like he had done this 1,000 times before. They reached a clearing just as another predator burst through the treeline. This one was larger, its muscular frame bristling with natural armor, its multiple eyes glowing with something disturbingly close to intelligence. Jace slowed. All right, we're doing this. Vorthix almost believed the human had a plan. Then Jace picked up a rock. Not a weapon. A rock. And threw it. It struck the predator's eye with pinpoint accuracy. The beast bellowed in fury, stomping forward, only for the ground beneath it to collapse. Jace grinned as the creature plunged into the pit below, impaling itself on jagged roots. Ledge traps, Jace said, dusting off his hands. Classic. Vorthix didn't know whether to be impressed or horrified. You planned that? He asked. Jace chuckled. Nah, I just figured something had to be worse than us out here. Vorthix stared at him. That is the most reckless, irresponsible. A blood-curdling howl echoed through the trees. Jace's grin faded. And that's our cue to move. For 3 days, they fought, bled, and ran. Jace's survival skills were unnerving. He navigated by instinct, set traps out of nothing, and laughed in the face of creatures that should have killed them both 12 times over. On the 3rd night, as they sat by a dying fire, Vorthix finally said it. You are not normal. Jace smirked. Took you long enough to figure that out. Vorthix stared into the fire. He had miscalculated. Asterisk, asterisk, wildly asterisk, asterisk. Humans weren't just resilient. They weren't just adaptable. There was something else entirely. Something terrifying. As dawn broke, they climbed back to the rendezvous point, bloodied but alive. The transport descended, Vorthix's squad waiting. Jace stretched. Well, that was fun. Vorthix, for the first time in his life, felt a genuine chill crawl down his spine. The worst part? He knew Jace wasn't lying. Vorthix had always believed himself to be prepared for anything. He had led soldiers into the abyss, fought against monstrosities engineered to destroy civilizations, and survived conflicts that had reduced entire worlds to ash. Yet, as he sat in the transport, watching Jace Carter lean back against the wall as if they hadn't just spent 3 days in hell, he found himself at a loss. The human was untouched by the experience in ways that defied understanding. Where Vorthix and his kind would have been haunted by the constant onslaught of lethal creatures, by the knowledge that even a single misstep would have meant a slow, agonizing death, Jace seemed unbothered. The ship's engines hummed as they ascended, the battered valley shrinking beneath them. Vorthix's soldiers sat in silence, their gazes flicking between him and the human. None of them spoke, but their expressions said enough. They had seen what he had seen. Jace Carter was not a normal soldier. He was something else entirely. Vorthix finally spoke. You planned for this outcome. Jace opened one eye. Which one? The "we survive" part? I like to be optimistic. Vorthix didn't appreciate the evasion. You knew this challenge would prove something to us. That was your intention all along. Jay stretched, joints popping. Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to see if you were as tough as you looked. Vorthix held his gaze. And Jay smirked. You're all right. For an alien. The transport shuddered slightly as they breached the upper atmosphere, the Deathworld receding behind them like a distant nightmare. And yet, for Vorthix, the real horror was sitting right across from him, wearing a grin like it was armor. He exhaled slowly, turning his attention to his squad. We return to the fleet immediately. Debriefing in 2 hours. Jace gave a lazy salute. Guess that means no drinks. Vorthix didn't answer. He didn't have one. The moment they landed on the warship, he strode toward the command deck. His second-in-command followed, silent and tense. The doors sealed behind them, the cool artificial air a stark contrast to the humid brutality of the Deathworld. Sir, the officer said carefully, what are your orders regarding the human? Vorthix turned to the viewport, watching the distant blue-green sphere that should have been their primary concern. It wasn't. Not anymore. Send the full report to High Command, he said. Classify humans as a Tier 1 strategic threat. A pause. A threat, sir? Vorthix's jaw tightened. They don't just survive. He exhaled. They adapt. They thrive. And worst of all, his fingers curled into a fist. They enjoy it.